hard to hear the word magic without thinking of one of the greatest magicians the world has ever known. Harry Houdini rose to the status of a household name by performing some of the most astounding feats of magical craftsmanship that the world had ever seen. From his early days as a young immigrant to a vaudeville star, to the renowned escape artist, to the great debunker of mediums, he lived a life still remembered today. Although he met his end under strange circumstances, his rise to fame is a story worth telling. Magic goes back a long way. The term magic derives from the Greek word magia. During ancient times, when the Greeks and Persians were at war, the ritual acts of Persian priests came to be known as magica, which eventually came to mean any foreign, unorthodox, or illegitimate ritual practice. In Roman society, magic was associated with cultures to the east of the empire. The first-century writer, Pliny the Elder, claimed that magic had been created by the Iranian philosopher Zoroaster, and that it had been brought west into Greece by the magician Osthenes, who accompanied the military campaigns of the Persian king Xerxes. In ancient Egypt, the Book of the Dead contains a long list of spells. Currently, there are just over 190 known spells, contained across multiple manuscript copies of the book. It is important to separate the concept of magical acts from illusion, as there are many modern magicians who prefer to be called illusionists. The father of modern entertainment magic was Jean-Eugène Robert Houdin, originally a clockmaker, who opened a magic theater in Paris in 1845. Before Houdin, magic was performed at fairs as a sideshow act. Bringing the performance to the theater leveled up his magic game to a more respectable presentation. Ditching the magical robes of his predecessors and opting to wear more professional attire, Houdin changed the game. Houdin specialized in creating automatons, mechanical robots that would appear to be alive and move on their own. He was even asked by the French government to go to Algiers, a French colony, and prove that French illusion is better than Algerian magic. The blow was struck. Henceforth, the interpreters and all those who had dealings with the Arabs received orders to make them understand that my pretended miracles were only the result of skill, inspired and guided by an art called prestidigitation, in no way connected with sorcery. He was rewarded for his services by the French government for suppressing any possible rebellion. Houdin's influence would go on to inspire a young immigrant who would later change his name to honor Houdin's accomplishments and change magic forever. Harry Houdini, one of the most famous magicians to play the game, was born as Eric Weiss in Budapest, Hungary in 1874. His parents were Rabbi Meyer Samuel Weiss and Cecilia Steiner. Eric was one of 7 children. The times required that the family move to America to find a better life, and Eric arrived in the United States on July 3, 1878 on the SS Frisia with his mother. Upon arrival, the family changed their name to the German spelling, Weiss, and Eric became Eric. The family lived in Appleton, Wisconsin, where his father served as rabbi of the Zion Reform Jewish congregation. Eventually moving to Milwaukee, the family fell on hard times, and Eric and his father moved again to New York City, once again in search of a better life. Once they had a stable place to live, the rest of the family joined them. Eric Weiss took several jobs to help pay the bills. At 9 years old, he made his public debut as a trapeze artist, calling himself Eric the Prince of the Air. At 16, he became a professional magician. He was inspired after reading Robert Houdin's autobiography and took the stage name of Harry Houdini in his honor. Weiss incorrectly believed that an I at the end of a name meant like in French. Later, Houdini claimed that the first part of his new name, Harry, was a homage to American magician Harry Keller. In the beginning, Houdini had little success. He would work sideshows and dime museums, focusing on card tricks. He called himself the King of Cards. Houdini performed with his brother Theodore, known as Dash, billing the act the Houdini Brothers. They were able to land a gig at the Chicago World's Fair in 1893, but it did little to help them. They returned to New York, continuing to work small, very low-paying acts. In 1894, Houdini met a fellow performer, Wilhelmina Beatrice Bronner, also known as Bess. Bess was initially courted by Houdini's brother, but she and Harry hit it off and immediately fell in love. The pair were married just 3 weeks later. Harry replaced his brother with Bess, which became known as the Houdinis. For the rest of Houdini's performing career, Bess worked as his stage assistant. Although they struggled in the beginning, things would begin to improve drastically for the Houdinis when Harry started to experiment with a different approach, something that would forever define his career: the escape act. The young couple developed a trick they called the metamorphosis. In the act, Harry would be shackled and locked inside of a trunk. Bess would then draw a curtain and clap 3 times. When the curtain was drawn open, the pair had switched places. In 1899, Harry met Martin Beck, a theater owner and booking agent who founded the Orpheum Circuit, a vaudeville theater. Beck saw the Houdinis in a beer garden in St. Paul, Minnesota. He was so impressed with Harry's escape skills that he asked Harry to try to escape using his own handcuffs. When Houdini easily broke free, Beck knew that he had something special in front of him. Beck encouraged Houdini to focus on the escape acts and booked him on the circuit. Within months, he was performing at the top vaudeville houses in the country. And in 1900, Beck arranged for Houdini to tour Europe and gave a demonstration of an escape from handcuffs at Scotland Yard. He succeeded in baffling the police so effectively that he was booked at the Alhambra for 6 months. His show was an immediate hit, and his salary rose to $300 a week, a little over $11,000 in today's money. Houdini had arrived. Houdini brought his act all around Europe, touring the Netherlands, Germany, France, and Russia, earning the reputation as the Handcuff King. He would challenge police to restrain him in locks and jail cells, all of which he easily escaped while building international fame and magical renown. In 1904, Houdini returned to the United States and purchased a house for $25,000, about $875,000 in today's money. Houdini had moved his act back to the United States. Managing to dazzle audiences with his daring escapes, he freed himself from jails, handcuffs, chains, ropes, and straitjackets, often while hanging from a rope in sight of street audiences. However, with great success comes imitation. Soon other artists began to pull off similar tricks, and Houdini needed to take things to the next level. He put his handcuff act behind him on January 25, 1908, and began escaping from a locked, water-filled milk can known as the milk can escape. Houdini first performed the milk can escape at the Columbia Theater in St. Louis on January 25, 1908. It was advertised with dramatic posters that proclaimed, "Failure meets a drowning death." The escape proved to be a sensation. At the time of Houdini, milk was often transported in large 60-gallon containers. Houdini devised a plan using these containers. He would fill the container with water, and then after being handcuffed would submerge himself into the can. Then the can would be padlocked shut. After enough time to give the audience a scare, Houdini would emerge, free from the handcuffs, outside of the can. With yet more imitators arising, Houdini would then have the locked milk can placed inside a wooden crate, called the double-fold death-defying water mystery. Houdini would challenge people to come up with escapes for him to perform. He once escaped from a barrel filled with beer and even from the belly of a whale. Still, he seemed to be able to escape anything with flawless execution. In 1912, Houdini outdid himself yet once again, this time with the water torture cell escape. Houdini had his water torture cell built in England at the cost of more than $10,000, approximately $350,000 today. The frame was made of Honduras mahogany and nickel-plated steel with brass fixtures. The front was half-inch thick tempered glass. The apparatus weighed around 3/4 of a ton and held 250 gallons of water. To perform the trick, Houdini would be shackled, hung upside down, and then lowered into the glass tank of water. A curtain would be drawn while the orchestra played the diver, and then after a few agonizing minutes, Houdini would emerge from behind the curtain with the tank still locked. This became Houdini's most famous trick, cementing his fame amongst his peers and fans. Of the trick, Houdini said, I believe it is the climax of all my studies and labors. Never will I be able to construct anything that will be more dangerous or difficult for me to do. There was only one incident of an accident in performing the trick. While being raised from the stage of the Capitol Theater in Albany, New York, one of the cables loosened and twisted, causing the heavy stalks to shift and fracture his ankle. Houdini performed many amazing tricks throughout his career, including escaping a straitjacket while held upside down from a crane, walking through a brick wall, making an elephant disappear, slicing a girl into eighths, and escaping a tomb while buried alive. Houdini was indeed a master of illusion. Houdini, always willing to expand his repertoire, wasn't satisfied with tricks alone. He soon turned his eye to the silver screen, to find his place in the magic of cinema. Hey you! Do you like the free content you're watching? Want to see more? Then for the love of all that's good and holy, please consider making a donation to the channel by becoming a Patreon member. You can find the link in the description below. If you want to see more Edgar Allan Poe films, historical and literary content, as well as the occasional video about crows, then don't be a cheapskate. Click on the Patreon link and help the channel help you explore your curiosity. In 1906, Houdini began showing his escapes on film as part of a vaudeville act. Over the next decade, his potential for the screen began to develop. In 1909, Houdini got an offer to star as Captain Nemo in a silent version of 20,000 Leagues Under the Seas, although the project never made it into production. In 1918, Houdini signed a contract with film producer B.A. Rolfe to star in a 15-part serial, The Master Mystery. Financial difficulties resulted in B.A. Rolfe Productions going out of business, but The Master Mystery led to Houdini being signed by famous Players Lasky Corporation, which later became Paramount Pictures, to star in The Grim Game and Terror Island. The Grim Game may have been Houdini's best picture. The film features a stunt where a stuntman dangling from a biplane is billed as Houdini hanging, perhaps an early inspiration to a stunt from a Mission Impossible film. Houdini did have experience in the air. In 1909, he purchased a biplane for $5,000, around $168,000 in today's money, and hired a full-time mechanic. After crashing once, he made his first successful flight on November 26 in Hamburg, Germany. He went on to be one of the first powered flights in Australia and even flew for an extended period of time, 7 minutes and 37 seconds, covering 6 miles and flying about 100 feet high. After his flight tour in Australia, he put his plane in storage and never flew again. Instead, he rolled up his sleeves and got ready to do battle with the conjuring arts, one he would wage war on that would last even to his death. Houdini was unique in that he never claimed to be supernatural, and he greatly disliked those that did. He would often discredit mediums and seemed to enjoy exposing any frauds that he could find. His disdain for the soothsayer may have roots of a more personal nature. After his mother passed away, his friend Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, creator of Sherlock Holmes, told Harry that his wife could communicate with his mother in the afterlife. Harry agreed to try, so they all got together and Lady Doyle began to write vigorously, a message from Harry's mother. After she finished, she handed Harry the note. There was just one problem. The note was in English, and Harry's mother didn't speak English. To make matters worse, each page of the writing was headed by a cross, something the Jewish wife of a rabbi would be unlikely to write. Harry was immediately rendered a skeptic, recognizing the session as nothing more than an illusion, something of which he was all too familiar. In 1922, his career had begun to plateau. His great tricks were no longer novel, and he was billed 5th in a 9-act show in Brooklyn. He needed to reinvent himself once again. So he used the experience with Lady Doyle to go on a mission to debunk mediums. He began a tour where he would expose the tricks they used. He would open each show with the words, "We laugh at the old stories of witches astride broomsticks flying through space. But what could be more ridiculous than to believe our dead appear in the form of ectoplasm through decayed teeth or any part of the medium's body? It is against all ethics to expose mysteries, but it is the duty of all citizens to expose cheats and frauds, and the most despicable cheats are the fraud mediums who use spiritualism as a cloak to prey on the gullible. Houdini would go on to recreate many of the effects experienced during the seances. He would also send out spies to bait the mediums into a trap. The spy would have a made-up name and story, and the medium would then communicate with a made-up dead person. Houdini would then expose the medium before a public audience, revealing the spy and embarrassing the medium. The spiritualists were developing a strong dislike for Houdini and would avoid him as best they could. Houdini went as far as to introduce a bill before Congress. In May of 1926, Harry introduced House Resolution 8989. If successful, it would ban the practice of fortune-telling in the District of Columbia. During the hearings, 300 astrologers and mediums were present, and the event became a media circus. The leader of the mediums, Jane B. Coates, said to Harry, "My religion goes back to Jesus Christ. Houdini does not know that I am a Christian." To which Houdini replied quickly, "Jesus was a Jew, and he did not charge $2 a visit." The mediums certainly had a presence in the federal government. Before the hearings, Houdini had hired a private investigator, Rose Mackenberg, to investigate the mediums in D.C. and found that dozens of senators and even Presidents Woodrow Wilson, Warren G. Harding, and Calvin Coolidge had regularly sought the service of mediums. Houdini asked the question, how can we trust politicians who are manipulated by fraudulent actors? Nonetheless, Congress viewed the bill to be an infringement on religious freedom and freedom of speech, dismissing the bill entirely. In the heat of argument, one medium, Madame Marcia, predicted that Houdini would be dead by November, a prophecy that would be put to the test in just a few months. Houdini continued to perform his tricks. On October 11, 1926, Harry broke his ankle while performing his water torture trick. Although even with a broken ankle, he still continued to perform. While in a dressing room in the Princess Theatre in Montreal, Houdini was reclining on a couch when a college student, Jocelyn Gordon Whitehead, asked Houdini if it was true that punches in the stomach did not hurt him. Houdini casually replied that his stomach could endure a lot. Suddenly, Whitehead began dropping hammer fists on Houdini's midsection while he was resting his broken ankle. Eventually, Houdini asked him to stop, making note that he was lying down and not given a moment to brace himself. Houdini still performed, and over the next 2 days his conditions grew worse. He developed a fever of 102 and appendicitis. The doctor said he needed immediate surgery, but Houdini refused and continued to perform while in great pain. When Houdini arrived at the Garrick Theatre in Detroit, Michigan on October 24, 1926, for what would be his last performance, his fever had risen to 104. Despite this, Houdini took the stage. He was reported to have passed out during the show, but was revived and continued. Afterwards, he was hospitalized at Detroit's Grace Hospital. His last words were, "I'm tired of fighting. Guess this is going to get me." Taking one last glance at his wife, Bess, he closed his eyes and died from peritonitis at 1:26 p.m. on Sunday, October 31st, 1926. Houdini's showmanship inspired magicians like David Copperfield, who in 1983 made the Statue of Liberty disappear, and David Blaine, whose feats of physicality included being entombed in an underground plastic box underneath a 3-ton water-filled tank for 7 days across from the Trump Place on 68th Street and Riverside Boulevard, as part of a stunt titled Buried Alive. BBC News stated, "The 26-year-old magician has outdone his hero, Harry Houdini, who had planned a similar feat but died in 1926 before he could perform it." Houdini did have somewhat of a last laugh with the mediums. Before he passed away, he and his wife Bess agreed upon a code that only they would know. Whoever died first, the other would try to contact them from beyond the grave, using a medium. The code was Rosabelle, answer, tell, pray, answer, look, tell, answer, answer, tell. Rosabelle was the name of the song Bess sang in her act when they first met, and the word was also inscribed in her wedding band. The other words correspond to a code which, when deciphered, would spell out the word believe. Best tried for 10 years. No one was able to receive the message. Since then, it has been a tradition to hold annual seances attempting to contact Houdini. It's hard to hear the word magician without thinking of Harry Houdini, but his accomplishments stretch far beyond casual parlor tricks. He was an immigrant living the American dream, a showman, an inventor, an aviator, a filmmaker, a debunker of frauds, and of course, a master illusionist. He is not only remembered for the life he lived and his great achievements, but for bringing magic to a worldwide audience, showing the world that anything is possible. Courageously defying the boundaries of illusion and physical feats to create magic.